Well, hello everybody. Thank y'all for coming on this beautiful day here to engage in a Stephen Forrest brand of evolutionary astrology. My name is Ryan Evans. I'm a certified master evolutionary astrologer with the Stephen Forrest School of Evolutionary Astrology. I've been studying this crazy astrology stuff for about 22 years. I even went through a disproving stage where I wasn't going to let anything outside of myself tell me about myself. That lasted for 2 months, 2 weeks, 3 days, 4 hours, and 32 seconds. Because it became very obvious that there is an incredible amount of validity and accuracy in this system, and I personally have found the most accuracy, the most penetrating insights, and the most what I'll call evolutionary encouragement in Stephen Forrest's perception and methods with the birth chart. And so what I'm going to talk about today is one of his methods in evolutionary astrology called creating or imagining the past life story. And what we're going to do is we're going to look at a very specific formula for looking at the birth chart and sussing out or delineating a possible past life scenario, past life situation, past life conundrum, complexity that quite literally caught us up in the wheel of karma and dharma, life and death and rebirth. These are really quite large questions. What's the meaning of life? Why are we here? What are we doing here with what we have? How do we do what we can with what we have? Why are some of us born musicians and other of us are born architects? What is with all of this crazy stuff? And in this small amount of time here that I have, what I'm going to do again is give you a formula for looking at the chart and sussing out a story that may or may not be quote unquote true factually, but has a definite resonance with our current life's lessons and complexities and predicaments and karmas, so as to find the way out. You know, if we often say, oh, why do all these things keep happening to me? We have these scripts that we'll talk about. Oh, we Joneses always marry plumbers, or every time I get into a relationship, this thing happens. We have these patterns, we have these scripts that we talk about in our minds and ourselves that we see, that we see in our life. We say, oh, that's normal, that's usual, that's typical. But why? Why is it normal and usual and typical for us to say, oh, here I am poor again. No matter what I do, there's always another bill that comes up and keeps me poor. No matter what I do in relationship, no matter how big I love, no matter how much I give, I always end up hurt. And that's just the way it is, and that's just the way it always is. And so by looking at this formula and applying it to ours or our clients' birth charts, we're able to suss out we're able to first make up a story as to what could have in past lives created these complex situations, created this trauma or this woundedness or whatever it is that may in this life keep repeating over and over We Joneses always marry the drunks. My mom married a drunk. I married a drunk. So are you gonna marry a drunk? No, no, please, no. And then we end up marrying a drunk, repeating the pattern. Why? These are found in the, again, what we'll call the past life story. And so the past life story, you know, it is the emotional being that is us that is carried on through lifetimes. It's the heart, right? The love never dies, and that love part of us is the part that continues to be reborn and learns its lessons or not. And then, since energy is never created nor destroyed, um, that energy continues and it percolates up into another being of consciousness, another human, in order to learn the lessons and hopefully integrate more of whatever it is we are to learn to come back to the heart, so as to come back more to the heart and more to the love. Because isn't that the answer to everything? Isn't that the meaning of life? Isn't that why we're here? To heal these fractured parts of our soul over lifetimes, and to come to greater wholeness and love and light in this life. And you know what? We may not get it right this time. We'll get another opportunity next time around. And so, by looking at certain symbologies in the natal chart, we're able to suss out what could have occurred in a past life to have created the trauma or created the woundedness. Or what was it? Were we burned at the stake? Were we left at the altar? Did we lose a child? What was the scene and the situation, and what were the experiences that happened in past lives to have created this trauma or this wound that we then bring with our hearts into this life to work on again. And so the trick is that when we can see what this past life story is in the chart, we can look at our current life or a client's current life and see how those patterns keep repeating. And then it is through a whole nother angle of looking at the chart where we find the way out, where we find the solution, where we find the healing, where we find the suggestions as to what attitudes and perceptions to have or engage in this life, in order to help remedy and heal, or at least apply a band-aid to any of the trauma that occurred in past lives, so that we get a little smarter, a little wiser, and hopefully a little lighter. I don't know if I said this in my last Zoom meeting, but it is applicable with this as well. In Tom Robbins' book, I believe it was Jitterbug Perfume, a man went to the other side, and the angels, for all intents and purposes, were weighing people's hearts on a scale. And on one side was the heart. They put the heart on the other side of the scale was a feather. And those hearts that were as light as a feather could go on to the ship that on one side said heaven, the other side said hell, same ship. And then any of the hearts which were lighter than the feather, well, they got to go wherever they wished. And those, of course, that were heavier than the feather had to go back down and try again. So one of the meanings of life is to have your heart at least as light, if not lighter, than a feather. And so this method that I'm about to, this formula that I'm about to give you, shows a way to assist us in doing that. So this is a 5-day workshop that I'm trying to condense down into the whatever 45 minutes I have remaining in this talk. So I'm going to go kind of fast, and bear with me. I'm going to be as cogent as humanly possible. Please save your questions till the end. I hope there's plenty of them, because again, I'm not going to be able to cover every last little piece of minutia in this formula, but I'm going to give you the very basic formula with which to engage in imagining the past life story. So again, for those of you who came a little later than I did showing up here, please bear with me. I am currently in West County, Sonoma County. I've been evacuated from the mega fires near Santa Rosa. So I'm experiencing a little displacement and its corresponding challenges and vicissitudes. So if I seem slightly distracted, just know that I'm doing this, having escaped wildfire. So back to the formula. So you can see on your screen here, this is my chart. I almost pulled up Jim Morrison's chart, but I actually just am sticking with this because it's a chart I know, and it is something that I have experienced deeply, and I get to, since I'm not being paid for this Zoom meeting, I get to pay myself with giving myself a little mini reading here. So know that I'm going to be talking to myself here as I read this chart. So the formula, check this out. If y'all can screenshot this first page here, or start writing it down as I'll flip back and forth between this screen and the chart. So please do your best to follow along, and I'll do my best to speak in a manner which helps you follow along. So what we're going to do is we're going to make up a story by looking at this chart. We're looking, where's the past? There's a whole life story here of multiple past lives. There's multiple past life stories in this chart. Well, what do we mean by that? Well, by looking at this chart, we're going to find who this person was in a past life, what situations they encountered in a past life, what blocked or vexed this person in a past life, what opposed this person in a past life, what could have helped this person in a past life, how this person failed horribly in a past life and then died. And then had a little talk with spirit there in the bardo, and then was sent back down to do what? The remedy, the way out. We're going to find that in this chart. Now, when I first learned this technique, I was like, okay, that seems like a lot. How are you going to do that? Steve says, very simple. Here's a 5-day lecture, a book, and then you can practice it for 8 years, and then you'll know how to do it. I said, okay, great, set me up. So the very first thing we do is the very first thing we do, not on the list, is we have to get out of our linear, descriptive, calculating astrological mind and get into our organic, imaginative, somewhat free associative astrological mind. We're going to look at these archetypes as a set of motivations and stimuli and situations, and we're going to look at this as creatively as possible. So the first thing, we're going to imagine a story, or what the motivating operative is of this individual, imagining that they were, in a past life, the sign of the South Node. And as we can see, South Node in Cancer. So what's Cancer? Cancer is the mother, the caregiver, right? So we start saying, okay, so this person, this person was in a caring, the person cared a lot, this person was a nurturer, this person in a past life was tender, kind of like a mother. The second thing we do, we look at the house position. Now, when we look at the house position, we're looking at the situation, we're looking at the context, we're looking at the situation that this person was working in. So here's the caregiver, the mother, the nurturer, operating in the context of first house. First house caregiver. Well, first house is like where we have the leader, where we're all alone in the first house. It's just about me in the first house. So is this person taking care of themselves, or is this person the solitary caregiver? So here's the caregiver operating all alone. So we start to say, okay, what is any story about? It's about the intersection of character and scene and plot. So, all right, let's make up a story. So first off, here's this solitary caregiver acting alone. This person is alone in whatever it is they're doing. So we imagine the situation of the house of the South Node. Number 2, this person is alone, operating. They are a helper. They are a lover, a giver, Cancer, but they're the only one, or they are the one in charge of that caregiving. See how that works? Third, we look to the planetary ruler of the sign of the South Node and look to the house placement to further describe the character and situations. So obviously the moon rules Cancer, so we'll look to the moon. Moon and Leo in the 3rd house. Well, the sign will describe the countenance, the attitude, and the motivation of this individual. This person was, again, he was sunny, he was radiant. We can think of Leo as a creative individual. We can think of Leo too as the sign of the king. We start to look for resonance. Oh, the sign of the king and the sign of the leader. Well, this person was all alone and in charge in the context of 3rd house. Yes, we can say news and the mind, and we can say speaking and stuff, but the leader, the caregiver of talking, no, that doesn't make sense. We try to suss out where the common threads are. Well, this is the house of brothers and sisters, right? Siblings. So, this person may have been a caregiver, a solitary caregiver for brothers and sisters. Very interesting. Well, let's see. Okay, that's very interesting. And this person had a motivation to keep their brothers and sisters happy, it looked like, and to be a shining example for the brothers and sisters. Okay, well, we're seeing a little bit of where this person was acting out on what stage and what was going on. So here's the solitary caregiver caring for the brothers and sisters. Why would this solitary caregiver, why would this person be caring for their brothers and sisters? That's very interesting. You see how we start to develop story here. And then what we do to further complexify the story, well, the first thing we do, which is not in this example, but the next thing we do is we look for planets or angles conjoin the South Node or its ruler to further describe and augment the character and the situations. So let's say Mars was conjoined that moon, just hypothetically. then we would say, and this person had a temper. Or we could say, and this person was violent. Or we could say, and this person had a heck of a lot of energy. But since Mars is not conjoined the moon, we're just going to put that back in the 5th house, and we're going to stay with our original story. So we then take this individual, this character, and the situation that we're starting to see, the individual caregiver for brothers and sisters, trying to be as happy and sunny as possible. Why would he be happy and sunny as possible? Oh, look, there's the planet Uranus squaring the south node. Now, one thing to remember, I'm going to interject at this time, one thing to remember is when we are looking at past life stuff, we're looking at situations that are keeping us locked in the wheel of birth and death. We are looking at things that are hard, things that completely sucked. We're looking at things that didn't go right for us in any life. So we're here again to learn from that. So we see the planet Uranus squaring the nodes, and we also see the planets, planetoid Chiron and dwarf planet Eris squaring the node, south node as well. So whenever there's a planet squaring, or a point squaring the nodes or its ruler, we're looking at persons or situations that were of a square-like situation to this person. They blocked them. They vexed them. They were things they could not get around. They were things they could not integrate successfully. They were aggravating. They were frustrating. They came up to a point, saw that it was difficult, maybe could have done the work to go past it, but was too difficult, and so represents what Jeff Wolf Green calls a skipped step in one's evolution. Uranus, sudden, shocking, traumatic events. Okay, Eris Chiron in conjunction, a completely insane event that could have created a bit of wounding. Okay, so if we're looking at a solitary caregiver, an individual who happens to be caring for his brothers and sisters, we could imagine, well, where's mom and dad? Whoa, Uranus, sudden, shocking trauma. And that Uranus opposes Chiron and Eris. Some craziness out in the world. Aries, something violently crazy out in the world, created some sort of wound to this situation, to this individual, to put them in that position of woundedness. Here's where we get creative. Here's where we make up a story. It's not necessarily there in the chart, but it is something that we can make up based on this information. Well, we see the solitary caregiver caring for his brothers and sisters all by himself based on some sudden shocking event that was supposed to be joyous, 5th house, dealing with relationships, some woundedness happening from some craziness out in the world. Let's get creative. The children were on their way to a happy place when the bandits came and attacked the covered wagon and killed mommy and daddy, and thus rendering the oldest sibling in this made-up story the parent caring for the brother and the sister. So you see how this symbology, it's loose. It's like you're using your creativity. You're injecting your imagination into these archetypes, looking at this nodal story as an opportunity for creative writing. So here we have the possibility of one's past life conundrum being the young boy who is on the trip out into the world with mother and father and brother and sister, trying to get to the happy place because maybe the past wasn't all that great, so they're moving to someplace better, and then all of a sudden, boom, something bad, traumatic, crazy, and wounding happens. Let's make it up. Let's spin it bad. Let's say mom and dad are now dead, and the young person who was a child himself, Leo Moon, has to get thrust into this position of raising children by himself. South Node in Cancer in the first house. Now we look to any planets that are, or points that are opposing the South Node or its ruler. We can see Jupiter in Capricorn opposing that South Node. We're using wide orbs, as you can tell. We're using 10, 11, 12 degree orbs here. So we want to bring in as much information as we can. We see that Jupiter and the descendant. Jupiter, luck, opportunity, and the descendant, other people, in opposition to this individual. So it looks like a serious case of bad luck. Nothing you can do about that. An opposition, that's in your face. There's nothing that you can do about an opposition other than do what you can do to integrate that. In a past life, though, since we're spinning the past life story to the shadow side, there ain't nothing that this person could have done about this situation because luck was obviously not on his side. It was the fortunate things in life that were against him. So we look to further this story, planets, angles opposing the South Node or its ruler. Now here's another trick. Any planets or angles, points, that are trine or sextile this the South Node or its ruler represent helpful people or situations in the past life story. Could have been some really good things. Maybe some people in their karmic stories have no squares, no oppositions to their South Node or its ruler. And these people could have been born with a silver spoon in their mouth and actually did absolutely nothing with their life and came to die, and that was their hell. That was their bad karma, was that maybe life was too easy. So be mindful that just because something looks good doesn't necessarily mean that it always is. So my note here, it says be mindful as to how the main character could have been helped into the problem. And so we'll take a look here and we'll take a look here and we'll see if there's anything in a trine aspect to the South Node or its ruler. And there's a wide trine here to Juno and Scorpio in the 5th house, and there's another wide trine to the not a wide trine, a pretty tight trine actually there, to the midheaven. So this individual may have found relationships out there that could have been encouraging. Oh yeah, hey, try this. Why don't you try selling some snake oil. I've got a great idea. Yeah, why don't you try doing that? That would be a creative thing to do, says Juno and Scorpio in the 5th house. And boy, you know, maybe this person, as he's trying to raise 2 children, being a child all by himself, is going to try whatever he can to feed these kids. And you know what? Maybe it didn't work. A trine to the midheaven there. Maybe this person wasn't really all that scared to come out into the world, but we look at Pisces there at the midheaven, no matter how much he came out into the world, chances are he wasn't seen. So here's this individual raised. You can see that we're starting to suss out a story here from the archetypes. We have an individual who is loving, is caring. I mean, he's a happy, for all intents and purposes, happy young child until the trauma happens and is thrust into the realm of being a solitary caregiver. What's he going to do? He's going to get hyper emotional, shadow Cancer. He's going to get dramatic. He's going to imagine maybe some intensities in his mind, 3rd house, that may not be there. Maybe hyper inflating and hyper dramatizing, Leo, the emotions, Moon, in his mind, 3rd house. And so therefore, we're looking at a life story where this individual is working desperately to feed his younger brother and sister, doing everything he can to imagine ways to keep them alive amidst a world that is in opposition to that. Jupiter and the descendant in opposition to the South Node. We're looking at the rules and the constructs of society and other people not accepting, not supporting, not encouraging this person, leaving him all by himself to fend his way. Now, let's just pretend that maybe, you know, brother and sister grow up and this child grows up and maybe brother and sister don't need taking care of after a while. Maybe brother and sister grow up and move to a different country and they're fine. Then we still have this individual who has an incredible amount of residual woundedness, trying to recover his happiness. Jupiter opposing that South Node. And so let's say this person is trying everything they can to improvise ways to not only feed the kids, but maybe when the kids get older, to find ways to remember how to just be happy. And we can think of Jupiter being so as far away from the South Node as it can be. We think of that happiness, that expansion. Jupiter in Capricorn, having one's life together, having things work, having things in this materially abundant place out in the world there on the descendant, as far away from the reality that this person knows as possible. So this person locked in the trauma of a Uranus South Node square, the skipped step of Uranus in this situation can show an inability to recover a true, authentic peace and happiness, Libra 5th house. So there's all sorts of ways, directions we can go with this. There's relationship directions that we can go with this. We can make this whole thing about interpersonal relationships. We can make this whole thing about career with the Capricorn signatures, with the 10th house signatures. There's so many different ways we can go with this. So when we make up a story, we can be like, oh, well, does it mean this? Does it mean this? Does it mean this? Does it mean this? You pick one and you go with it. And if it works, then the symbology works. Now let's go back to the list here. So what we do, we spin the story bleakly. We give it as much tragedy as we can imagine, and we're not going to be wrong based on most of human history. And then the most powerful thing we can do here is end it. End the story. And so this person trying to raise the kids after the tragedy, the kids grow up, and the person still held on to the tragedy, still held on to the wound, couldn't get past it, saw all the good things in life, like through a Charles Dickens child looking at the Thanksgiving turkey through the glass. It's so close and it's right there, but on the other side of the impenetrable glass. And so this individual dies, and we say, well, then he goes up to the pearly gates and is talking with the big white-haired guy in the sky who pulls out his file cabinet and pulls it out and says, oh yes, Ryan Evans, oh, let's see. Oh yes, oh I see, aha. And Spirit says to us, so how did you do with that? And we say, in the situation, I said something like, well, it sucked because it was so emotional and it was so dramatic and it was so intense and there was so much trauma and the world was so scary and no matter what I did, it wasn't good enough. And here's where we're saying all our scripts that we end up repeating in this life. And Spirit says, I want you to go back down there and I want you to try again. And immediately the character in the story says, what, are you crazy? This happened and this happened and this happened. I'm not going down there. And then here's where we look to the healing. And so then we look to the sign and the house of the North Node and its ruler. And these represent then the attitudes to have and the choices to make to heal the wounds of the past. So we're having this conversation with Spirit in the Bardo. And Spirit then gives us a lecture on how we need to integrate the North Node, the sign and the house that the North Node is in, and its ruler in order to come to the healing. So let's look. So what does Spirit say to this crazy dude Ryan? Spirit says, I want you to get down there, go back down there, and I want you to be Capricorn. I want you to take all of your hyper-emotionality, all that dramatic intensity that you felt, and ground it like a good Capricorn. What are the positive attributes of Capricorn? It's not non-emotionality. It's about being able to be strong and stable and non-hyper emotional in the face of emotionally stimulating circumstances. Capricorn hikes up the mountain and gets slapped in the face by a tree branch, and Capricorn straightens its glasses and its backpack and continues on. It's the shadow of Cancer that will be like, oh God, this branch, oh, everything sucks. I'm not going to move up this hill anymore because it's just too hard, says Cancer in its shadow. So the remedy for that to be more Capricornian. Now we look to the ruler, Saturn in Gemini in the 12th house. Now this is a day-long lecture in itself, Saturn in the 12th house, let alone Saturn and Gemini in the 12th house. But suffice it to say, to encompass the meaning of that archetype into one little nugget, I'll call it faith. The ability to see the good and the bad, and the light and the dark, and the positive and the negative, and to approach it from a relatively omniscient place where we are detached a bit from the person who may be from ourselves, from the person who may be suffering. So Saturn and Gemini in the 12th house, to have faith that if everything looks like it sucks, know that cycles and seasons turn, and that one day it will become bliss, and that bliss we can't hold on to forever, and to have a wisdom where we can, not think that bliss is going to be there forever. So we integrate the light and the dark in Gemini and in the 12th house. And Saturn, of course, shows us where our hard work is. So Spirit is up there telling past me, my soul, the Ryan Evans guy, telling him, I want you to go back down there, and regardless of the wounds, the tragedy, the hyper emotional stimuli, regardless of that, you are to have faith. You are to have the wisdom to look at any situation through different perspectives and not get stuck just in the shadow perspective, because that was the past life karma. So we say that the remedy for this chart is both Capricorn 7th house, I forgot to bring that piece into it, Capricorn 7th house, being able to trust other people, and here's the big one of 7th house, ask for help. This person in a past life did not ask for help because they thought that they were the only person who could do it. 1st house. In the 7th house, we have to let other people in. And North Node, that's the hard work that we're doing. That's the most unfamiliar part of our being, which is exactly what we need to learn and integrate. So how to be responsible and mature and ask for help while having faith, Saturn and Gemini in the 12th house, that everything is going to be okay. And so, Ryan's up there, he's talking with Spirit. How do I do that? How do I get to that? And Spirit says, well, if you're an astrologer, you can look to the points or the planets that are squaring the South Node or the ruler as teachers, asking us to integrate the positive attributes of those archetypes by doing the hard work of the square, which is doing really hard work. And so we go back here and we say, okay, well, we got to do this hard work. What is that hard work? Well, the hard work of being incredibly authentic with who we are, Uranus. The hard work of accessing our original genius, Uranus. Oh, our original Libra artistic genius. Oh, Libra 5th house, our unique, original, creative, expressive genius. So, Spirit says to this guy, use your creativity, young Padawan. Okay, my creativity. Gotta remember my creativity. There was trauma in a past life, and for some reason I didn't use it. I wasn't able to think that my creative original idea could have really worked. What else is square the nodes? Chiron, Eris in the 10th house in Aries. That right there is a fear of the world, which means that the remedy is to have your strength in the world. So Spirit tells this individual, you may come out one day as a Chiron wounded healer. leader. Chiron and Aries in the 10th house. You may upset some old systems of status quo. That's okay. That's what you need to integrate in order to get to this place of having your stuff together. North Node in Capricorn. So Spirit's having this conversation with this guy in the Bardo saying, oh geez, well, I guess there are some things that I can do here. Looks like I have some work to do. And lastly, we look for planets or points that are in trine or sextile to the North Node or its ruler for a little bit of help. And we can see here that that sextiling this North Node is, let's see here, what have we got? Well, sextiling the descendant and Jupiter here is this Mars-Venus conjunction in the 5th house. To be incredibly passionate and powerful and with one's creative expression. That is a gift of yours that will help you. What else is out there? Well, let's see. There is that Uranus that was square the nodes is actually trine the ruler of the North Node. So, Spirit says to this guy, you have incredible genius. If you use your genius, if you use your creative genius, it can assist you in changing your perspective from one of shadow to one of faith. Another million ways we can go with this. Saturn in Gemini, give form to the words. We call that writing. 5th house, creative. Uranus, Libra, the creative writer, in a trine to an archetype about creative writing. Saturn and Gemini in the 12th house, creative spiritual writing. So Spirit is saying, your way out is through your creativity, is through your faith, it's through your having confidence and courage in the world. Whatever you can do to integrate those attributes into your life, it will assist you in healing your karma and lightening your heart. All right, 5 days worth of information packed into an hour. So I am going to take that last 45 minutes, crunch it down into the next 2 minutes. So to recap, finding the nodal story, we have to get very, very creative with these archetypes, and we have to make them into plot and character and situation, and combine them all into a made-up story that doesn't end well. That is the secret of creating this past life conundrum. And then we put this person into the bardo, where Spirit or our spirit guides or God or goddess or creator or the mirror or whatever we want to call it is talking to us, saying, hey, this is the way out. Now it becomes your task to go back down there and integrate that. Is that easy? No. That is going to be the hardest work that any person has. Doing their North Node work, doing the ruler of their North Node is theoretically the hardest work that anyone can do. To make that easier, they have to do the second hardest work that any human has to do, which is take the shadow of any planet that's square or opposite the nodes and spin those as positively as humanly possible. So here we have the past life story of somebody who was traveling out in the world with the family, and then the bad guys came, killed mom and dad. The kids escaped, and the eldest had to raise the children on their own, improvising ways of how do I feed them. Maybe he even stole, lied, cheated. Any of those shadow third house, stood on a soapbox, tried to do a little song and dance, a little tap dance, anything he could do for a couple of pennies to feed his kids, but completely lacked the ability to seek outside of himself for help, because he saw out there all of everybody else who was happy and everybody else who had their stuff, and felt what? Hyper emotional, felt sad, felt shame. Kids grew up, kids went on, and he was left with residual trauma, residual fear of the world, and residual projections onto other people that if you are rich or you have things together, then I'm not going to even talk to you because maybe you're bad or wrong or did something. And then this person may have lived a long, lonely life and then died, and went and spoke to Spirit, and Spirit said, you have to go down there and have faith. You have to go down there and reduce your hyper emotionality and ground it into wisdom, ground it into being some sort of servant, elder, Capricorn, for other people, 7th house. And the way to do that is by accessing your creative genius and your ability to be a wise, powerful healer. Chiron Eris in the 10th house. And if you pull this off, you may just lighten your heart a tiny bit. So, running out of time. Again, I could talk on this for hours, but I will take this time now to answer any questions.
Yes, I have a question.
Anyone have questions?
Yes.
Yes, Marie.
Yes. You mentioned Eris in the stories, and I have Eris in conjunction with the North Node, so I'm curious to hear how you interpret that.
Sure. Whenever there is a planet that is conjoined the North Node, there are two distinctly different ways of viewing that. Eris is in number one, Eris is opposing the South Node. So in a past life, on some level, with Eris opposing your South Node, the themes of Eris, chaos, intense competition over the last chicken, and there's 5 of you, a need for incredible justice amidst rulers who aren't as smart as you. These themes were opposing you somehow in a past life. Possibility 1. Possibility 2, Eris opposing the South Node. Crazy, chaotic, or otherwise dark or insane events could have occurred, and there was nothing you could have done about it. The ship catches on fire in the middle of the ocean. What are you going to do? The ship goes down. So whenever we're looking at an opposition, we're looking at something that may have been beyond our ability to deal with. And so Eris or any archetype conjoined the North Node, spin it darkly, that was in opposition to you in a past life. 1. 2. Any planet that is conjoined the North Node, as well as being opposing the South Node, is therefore an archetype when spun in the positive, becomes that which you must emulate in order to get your life right. Eris in the positive is like, I imagine Rosa Parks. I imagine the suffragist movement was an Arisian movement. No, you women are supposed to stay down. No, you can't vote. And the suffragists were like, oh, yes, we can. Screw you. You know, Eris threw the golden apple into the crowd of goddesses, not to create chaos, but to teach them a lesson that there was absolutely no other way they could learn, but through a little bit of chaos. So one could say that, Marie, maybe it would be pertinent for you to let loose a bit of your wild side and break some rules and take your power back and draw your sword and slice through some of those things that may be opposing that part of you that, I'm assuming South Node in Libra, that may have a tendency to be too nice.
Makes sense.
So that would be a way. That would be the dime. That would be the put the dime in the slot and tell me what you think about it answer.
I love it. I love it. Yeah, I do. Yeah, there is a part of me that do feel wild. Yes. Yes.
Yes. Be that. Do that. Love it.
Well, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. Thank you, Marie. We'll take one more question.
Okay, I'll ask a question. It's Lauren.
Hi, Lauren.
Hi, thank you. So I have like a couple questions and one question again. Okay, so sometimes there's intercepted houses.
Yes.
And then like in the house that I have my North Node in, I have 3 different signs, but the planets in that house are like karmic because it's the same sign of my North Node.
Mm-hmm.
So Venus is in there, but it's in a different sign. So it's like kind of weird. Like, so if there's 3 different signs, would that still be a conjunct but out of sign?
Yes. Yes. I will use a 10, sometimes even a 12. I've gone up to 15-degree orb of conjunction and of aspect. So not knowing your chart or what signs or planets in it, just for example, if one has a North Node in Aries, pardon me?
Oh, I was going to say it's in Libra.
You have a North Node in Libra, but
Yeah.
say your Venus is in Virgo.
Yes.
Something like that.
Yes, exactly.
If they are within that 10-degree orb, they are still conjoined. All we're looking at when we look at the signs, we're looking at the themes that motivate us into action. Libra motivates us towards peace and calm, and Virgo motivates us into healing. And so what we do is, just because they're in different signs does not mean that we can't integrate that. Venus in Virgo with a North Node in Libra shows us that we find our peace, we find our ease and our equilibrium by doing those things for ourselves, which help to make us better. So we wake up, we have our rhythm, we have our routine, we drink our tea, we do our yoga, we we go on Facebook for just a little while, and we do these things that we know we need to do to better ourselves, and doing those things, Venus and Virgo, that help us to feel better about ourselves by taking better care of ourselves, ends up bringing us to Libra, more peace, ease, and equilibrium. So
Yeah.
there's no, so don't think about it being like disparaging. Think about integrating. Think about how, you know, well, my Venus is in Scorpio, but my North Node is in Libra. I mean, Libra wants peace and Scorpio wants intensity. Well, how do we integrate those? We think we look for the common denominators. You can list 50 things for Libra and 50 things for Scorpio, and we can see that of those 50 things, there's 4 or 5 or 6 that do have that resonance. Relationship, together. The peace that comes after Scorpio intimacy is also a peace that can come through Libra verbal connection. And so we're looking at words like intimacy. We're looking at words like peace. So even if it seems, no matter what the archetypes are, even if they seem disharmonious, there's always common denominators to find ways where they intersect and where they can agree on things, even if it's an inconjunct or something like that.
Thank you. That's really interesting. And so the other interesting part is that I have both the North Node house and the 7th house now. The 1st and 7th house, or whatever the house is, I've intercepted planets there.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yep. And so, you know, interceptions, retrogrades, you know, don't let any of this stuff scare you, because it's just another descriptive word for the story. An interception is just simply more an internal feeling or something that we can't necessarily easily access. So maybe it's a good idea to ask somebody else's opinion as to, what do you think this North Node in Libra means? And so, you know, so when we think of interceptions, just think of a little bit longer process of the flower petals to unfurl than just a quick blossom. The interceptions take a little more time. They're a little more sensitive. They're more internal, much like a retrograde. So just a little more patience and awareness with the interceptions.
beautiful analogy. Thank you.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you, Lauren, and thank you, Ryan. That was incredible. Thank you so much for sharing your technique, and see you next time. And thanks to Molly.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ryan.
Okay. Bye.
Thanks, Ryan. Bye.
Yep. And Linda, I'll send that stuff to you post haste.
Okay, thank
All right.
you.
Thanks, everybody.